Alright guys, I think the torture of this beta cycle is finally over. Let's make one last tour for Sandrone's compositions. Hello there, Flip here, and today we're going to be diving into Sandrone's teams, how good they're stacking up to be in the current meta, how dependent she is on her best supports, as well as how good all of her supports are, as well as giving a small retrospective on how to build the supports in her teams. But before we do that, as always, if at any point during the video you are entertained or informed, make sure to drop a like and even consider subscribing, as I talk on various topics regarding Genshin's meta, and I'll try to keep you updated. Huge shout out to all my lovely channel members, I really appreciate your support, it means the world to me. I don't think I have anything fancy to say this time, come back in the next video, and enough stalling, let's just get right into it. Now, as with all good Sandrone videos, since she's a new character with a new element, let's just quickly recap what she does, and some other things with her that should be relevant for her DPS. Sandrone is an on-field cryo damage dealer, with her main gameplay loop revolving around her charge attacks, and when in a Stellar Conduct field, she will be able to do Stellar Conduct damage directly, and direct Stellar Conduct damage functions the same way as direct Lunar damage, where it ignores defense, has some base multipliers, and doesn't care about elemental damage bonuses. And in regards to what the Stellar Conduct reaction does, when Sandrone is on your team and Cryo and Electro react with each other, this is going to create a Stellar field, which will allow certain characters to gain buffs, and in Sandrone's case allow her to do Stellar Conduct damage, and on top of this, every 4 seconds the amount of Electro and Cryo you apply is going to be recorded, and once those 4 seconds of recording is up, you will gain a team-wide Electro and Cryo damage bonus, as well as the base multiplier of Stellar Conduct being increased. The Stellar Conduct field starts at level 0 but can go up to level 12, and the level of your Stellar Conduct field will also reset every 4 seconds, so you want to have continuously fast Electro and Cryo application, so you're getting the most benefits from the Stellar field buffs. Hoyoverse has to hate me. I waited an entire week after version 5 to start making this video. The moment I finished recording, a few hours after, you cannot make this up, they changed how Stellar Conduct works again. So I indeed recalculated everything for this video, and in regards to how Stellar Conduct works right now, we have no idea. We have gotten confirmation from testers that at the very least, you are getting more stacks on average than before, so it is just a direct buff. And even though it says it's based on hits right now, testers are saying application still plays into it somehow, or there's some kind of cooldown that makes it more awkward than what it appears to be. So basically the rules on how to level up your Stellar field, we don't have any idea anymore. We just know that it's more than what we were assuming before. And using a somewhat neutral baseline, I'm just assuming across the board it's +2 average stacks. So mostly 9 to 10 from what I'm assuming. Hoyoverse, please spare me. Can we stop adjusting the Stellar field now? And like with a reaction like Lunar Bloom, Stellar Conduct doesn't deal damage and is only means to buffing your character that does do Stellar Conduct damage. And going back to Sandrone, she has an overheating charge attack, and to balance the overheating you use her elemental skill, which does decent damage on top of clearing overheat. And there's actually a lot of cool cancels you can do with her skill, because the damage of her skill comes out immediately when cast, and her skill now completely cleanses her overheating. Any animation cancel you do will cut the E animation short, while still doing what's important like clearing overheat and dealing damage. So this means you can dash or jump out of her skill to end it early. You can also use her skill and then swap out for effectively no field time, and you can also cancel her skill with her burst. Surprisingly for a modern DPS, her burst is actually quite important, as it just does so much damage, and you are also able to swap cancel the burst quite early into its animation, while it still continues to deal damage. Sandrone's burst is so good in fact that you want to build the energy to burst every rotation with her, as not using the burst every rotation is a DPS loss. And this is where we can start talking about Sandrone's team building. Sandrone really wants a second Cryo character on her teams, because well, for one, Cryo Resonance is a pretty good buff, being 15 crit rate with a pretty decent uptime in double Cryo teams, and adding on to what I just said, Cryo characters are able to give particles to Sandrone, allowing her to burst consistently without her having to build like over 30% ER. And the funniest thing ever is that Chi-Chi's actually the GOAT when it comes to this, as she generates the most cryo energy for Sandrone. When Erotic Walrus called Chi-Chi a cryo battery, he wasn't wrong just early, because when you bring Sandrone, me and you will be using Chi-Chi as a battery. Because of her buffs, which I covered in my last video, Chi-Chi has turret-based particle generation, generating 2 cryo particles every 6 seconds whenever her skill hits an opponent. And because Chi-Chi can just use her skill and instantly swap into Sandrone, this means means you're able to funnel 6 cryo particles into Sandrone, on top of the 5 to 6 she already generates at a base, on top of the potential fav proc that is also going to Sandrone. So that is 11 to 12 cryo particles on top of a fav proc to Sandrone, allowing her to have very low energy requirements at 10 to 20%, even lower with Electro Resonance, when Chi-Chi is able to fully funnel her. The only issue is that on some teams you can't always use Chi-Chi into Sandrone, and then with C6 you want to use Chi-Chi's burst, which makes Sandrone lose out on 2 cryo particles and a fav proc going directly to her, which raises her energy needs to the 130-ish I stated prior, but I still think it's really funny how Chi-Chi is theoretically her best battery. These findings do also make C6 Chi-Chi a bit worse, as not only is it a rotation extension, but you are now also missing out on funneling particles to Sandrone, so you're raising energy requirements and extending rotations, making it now only currently around a 4% damage increase over C0 to C5 Chi-Chi. I'm just realizing I didn't even mention my Chi-Chi's good. She gives a team-wide 50% stellar conduct damage bonus while her skill is active, on top of fitting in shorter rotations, so she's just a really good buffer for this team. For another cryo sustain that's really good, Diona exists, who is also buffed with stellar conduct in receiving coordinated attacks, so she can more consistently apply cryo, and her C6 was buffed to not only just give 200 EM to the active character, but additionally also buffs stellar conduct damage bonus by 40%. And then for the last cryo sustain you would consider using, we have Escoffier. Escoffier wasn't buffed to synergize with stellar conduct, but her 10% cryo res shred, more consistent application for cryo resonance uptime, and the fact that she does 6 times the damage of Diona and Chi-Chi, she still ends up being a very good option in these teams. Now comparing how they stack damage wise, Chi-Chi and Escoffier are neck and neck in being the best cryo options for Sandrone, with Chi-Chi being better the more investment you have in Sandrone, and being the de facto best in slot at C6, on top of her healing coming from her skill anyways, which doesn't interrupt the calculation, whereas if you do need the healing, which you shouldn't need with Nicole, but just in case you do need the healing, Escoffier will have to use her burst for that to happen, which would increase rotation time and make her less viable. So in my opinion, there's really no reason why you should be using anyone other than Chi-Chi. And then Diona, while being a more comfortable sustain than both Chi-Chi and Escoffier, she does fall short in the fact that her buff uptime is worse than Chi-Chi's, being 3 seconds shorter, on top of you having to play in 20-second rotations, which Diona doesn't buff more than Chi-Chi enough to compensate for this. And also Diona's buffs aren't team-wide unlike Chi-Chi's. So when slotting someone like Yai in your teams who does a ton of damage, as you can see, not also buffing Yai is a bit of a hindrance to the team's damage. And I'm just realizing now how funny that sounds when Yai is dealing more damage in the Diona team. That is just because I'm assuming she gets 1 extra turret hit on average, due to the slightly longer rotation. And in regards to how you build the cryo sustains, they all share the same build. You want to use Fav and Tenacity on them, so they can function as better batteries for Sandrone. And in cases where you're doubling up, like you're using Chi-Chi and Diona at the same time, or Chi-Chi and Escoffier at the same time, Diona's the easiest to side grade as she wants to burst every single rotation, ideally right before Sandrone because she has the lowest buff uptime, in which case she functions really well with Noblesse. Escoffier can switch to using a damaging set like Golden Troop, and from there should never really be a reason to take Chi-Chi off Tenacity, with the only exception being when she's C6. If you are doubling up, then another character can use Tenacity and Chi-Chi can use Noblesse. Now moving on to Electro teammates, there really isn't that many options. It's pretty much you're using Yai or you're using Beidou. I have talked about Yai so many times already, but she also provides a 50% stellar conduct damage buff on top of an electro damage buff, with her C1 which is free and you should get. It is one of the best C1s in the game right now, and this is all while she has some of the strongest sub DPS output in the game, due to the stellar hits they added in her buffs, on top of the quills she can give herself too. So Yai is just a very strong sub DPS and buffer. A lot of people have grievances with her longevity in stellar conduct teams, as she can be replaced, potentially, maybe, no one really knows. But a C1 Yai is just so strong in these teams that I find it very hard to believe she can really be replaced anytime soon. She does comparable if not more sub DPS than an Effa, while buffing more than an Effa at C1, so unless the stellar conduct supports we're getting are going to be batshit insane, I feel like it's a very safe bet to pick up Yai. But if you want the safest bet possible, then in that case getting Sandrone's signature would be that, as using Beidou as a Yai replacement, who receives stellar conduct buffs where she now gives 200 EM to the active character, as well as reducing cryo and electro resistances by 15% while her burst is active. Having Sandrone's signature while still being worse than C1 Yai currently, it's a piece of gearing that no matter the unit power creep, can never be taken away from Sandrone teams, and it should also technically be cheaper than getting Yai. So if you want to be as safe as possible, while I don't think Yai is a bad pickup, and I think she has longevity in and Sandrone teams, you really can't go wrong by just picking up Sandrone's signature regardless. And for how to build both Yai and Beidou for Stellar Conduct, Yai wants to use the new DPS Stellar Conduct set, and to be the most optimal, you want to use the opposite goblet to your Sands. So if you have an attack percent Sands, you want an Elemental Mastery goblet, and if you have an EM Sands, then you want an attack percent goblet. The majority of Yai's damage right now is Stellar Conduct, and because Stellar Conduct doesn't care about electro damage bonus, neither does Yai right now really. And then for Beidou, just give her Noblesse. From her buffs, she received a new passive where she can gain a lot of energy more consistently. The only issue is that that requires you to take a lot of field time, which isn't really worth it. So you most likely will be running her with an ER Sands and a Favonius Greatsword just to manage her energy needs. Unless you're just a perfect parry god. But as you can see from the calculations, there's still a very big gap between Beidou and Yai, especially if you don't have Sandrone's signature. But as I said prior, we just don't really have that many characters synergistic with Stellar Conduct. Ever since the Stellar field changes to make it based on Electro application, a lot of people have been bringing up Fischl, but Fischl isn't good in Stellar Conduct teams, nor does she really apply that much Electro in this case. Sandrone is a charge attack based DPS, so you won't be getting Fischl's C6. The dominant aura in Stellar Conduct teams is most of the time going to be Cryo, so Sandrone won't be reacting either to proc Fischl's A4. So you're mostly just getting the raw Oz hits without any extra Electro apps. So that's like one Electro application every 4 seconds, which isn't really a lot. The only scenario in which you'd want to use Fischl is if you also have Nicole, and therefore you can activate Fischl's Hexerei passive. And if you can trigger an overload, that can give Sandrone some uptime on a 45% attack buff. And that is the only real place where Fischl is viable. And on the topic of unorthodox Sandrone teams, we also have a Stellar Lunar Charge team that takes advantage of the Benefa wheelchair alongside Sandrone's damage, which isn't really that high in this team, as she isn't really getting any stellar buffs, on top of this team having a low amount of Cryo and Electro application, so your stellar field's level is quite low, and some thunderclouds do get missed from Sandrone's Cryo application. So yeah, you would only really play these teams if you're Yai-less and struggling. Now moving back to more traditional Sandrone teams, I've been using Nicole as the baseline support for these teams, but please do not misunderstand, she is not a vital part to Sandrone's team identity. The main benefit of Nicole is that she buffs both Sandrone and Yai's damage, who are very attack-hungry characters, but she is missing like half of her kit, and with how the stellar field changes made Cryo and Electro application more important, I expect Nicole to be the quickest to be replaced. In fact, full Cryo and Electro teams, due to the application to give more stellar field levels, are already performing really relative to Nicole. And for other flex slot options, running an Instructor Shalonen or Sucrose are also very good options, due to the Red Shredding and Elemental Mastery buffs. So please don't worry, Nicole isn't really fundamental to Sandrone's teams. You will get by just fine without her. Now evaluating Sandrone's performance as a whole, I think it's kind of insane just how strong she is right now, assuming you have Yai, as she has multiple teams using not very contested characters that is already among the top 5 DPS range in the game. And when we get to 7.x, she's only going to get stronger from here on out. We may get a Snezhnaya resonance, like we had a Nordcry resonance, and a supportive artifact set is pretty much a given, but I really feel like over the course of 7.x, unless Lunar teams get a buff, like Nefer having an actual forward slot, Sandrone should just soar past the Lunar meta. She's already competing with basically everyone besides the Lunar carries, and she doesn't have to do any advanced tech or combos like Skirk and Movwika, and with the guaranteed upgrade she's going to get in the future, I don't see how that doesn't become a reality. The only limiting factor to Sandrone is just the fact that no one has Yai, and it's going to be hard to pull for both her and Sandrone in the same patch. There is also another problem with Sandrone, but I'm not sure how much people care about this, but in comparison to other DPSs, her vertical investment is very weak. So even if Sandrone is strong at a C0 level, other DPSs like Movwika, Skirk, Varka can pretty easily catch up if you have constellations on them. Some characters C1s are stronger than Sandrone C1 and 2, combined, and the only way I can see them fixing this is if her dedicated future potential support has really good constellations, and you would rather pull for their cons instead. Her constellations are so bad that Risley and Sino are able to catch up with her performance when you get them to C2 and beyond. They cut Risley C6 and 3, and he still is a better DPS than Sandrone at C6. So I don't really know what they're cooking there, and I don't think the majority of people who watch me care about dolphin to whale level discussions. DHC can handle that. But with that, I think I'm done yapping, so thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment what team you're going to be playing with Sandrone, as I would love to hear hear it and I respond to almost every single comment. Channel members, thank you so much for your continued support. I love you all. Have an amazing day. Thank you to everyone else for watching the video, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.